What about if we want a button, and every time you hit that button, you want the paragraph text to change? So say we've got 4 or 5 quotes. Every time you hit that button, it must randomly select one of those quotes and display it to the screen. How would we do that? Well, let's do it together. So the first step is let's create a brand new folder. And let's call this Project Function Advanced. Okay, within here, let's have an index.html file. We've been through this. We know that this is where we have to begin. Let's just create a standard template. And here, let's have a button. And let's call this button Show Quote. And now we want a container where we can show the quotes in. So let's just have an empty paragraph tag for now. If we see this online, let's just have a look at what it looks like. We should just see an empty button that does nothing. When we click Show Quote, nothing happens. We haven't defined anything yet. But we know we've got a button. Below the button, we're going to have a paragraph tag that is now empty, but that's going to be showing our quotes. So let's go back to our editor and let's work on our quote. So let's create, again, let's just say we've got a public folder. And within the public folder, let's say we've got your script, your JavaScript, where we write all our JavaScript. And in here, we want to show our quotes. So let's define a function. We start with the function keyword. We call it now whatever we want. Let's just call it show quote. And within the curly braces, that's where we have all our code, our meat. And this is where we're going to be getting into using different data types that we've learned. This is why it's important we learned those things previously and not now. So the first step is we need a place to store all of our quotes into. Where would we do that? How would we do that? Remember, quotes are just strings. It's going to be the string data type. How can we store multiple quotes? Yes, in an array, because an array stores multiple values. So let's call our array quotes. And let's start off by making our array empty. We haven't got any quotes in them yet. And now let's add our quotes. How do we add quotes? Well, we call our array. We state that the first item in the array, and remember, it starts with index 0 because it references where in memory we're going to access this from. And now at 0, we're going to access it directly from its very starting point, which is why it's 0. First quote is when you reach the end of your rope, tie a knot in it and hang on. Let's add another quote. To add another quote, we access our array, which now has one item in it. And now we want it to be the second item in the array. And this quote can be, there's nothing permanent but change. There's nothing permanent but change. Let's add another quote. We access our array. Now we're saying we want it to be the third element. And let this quote be something else. Say, luck is a dividend of sweat. And let's just do one more. Access our array. We want this to be the fourth element in the array. And this quote can just be, it takes as much energy to wish as it does to plan. So there we go. We've got our quotes. We've got 4 quotes within this array. Now what we're wanting to do is we're just wanting to display them randomly when this show quote function is executed, when it's invoked. How do we do that? Well, we need to create a random number between 0 and 3 to access each one of these quotes. How do we do that? Well, let me write it down first, then I'll explain to you what it is we've done. Let me just get rid of this here. So all we're going to do is define a random variable that keeps changing. And this random variable will be the one that calls our quotes array. So in effect, this rand is going to replace these numbers, 0, 1, 2, or 3. That rand will be a number that keeps changing. That's all we're trying to do. We're going to access JavaScript's math object, and we're going to access the floor method on it, which just makes it a round whole number. Otherwise, it's going to produce random numbers that are not a whole number, and we won't be able to access it in our array. That's all that this floor function does. Then we're going to access JavaScript's math random function. And because math.random produces a number between 0 and 1, we need to multiply by our array length in order to allow this rand variable to take values the same length as our array. So that's why we've got to multiply by the quotes length. And that's it. We've literally defined our random variable. Now, what is the last step? So let me just comment this so you know what's happening. Create a random number between 0 and 3. And now what do we have to do? Well, now we've got to access our paragraph. Remember that paragraph tag? I'll show you again. In the index file, we've got this paragraph tag. We want to display the quote in that paragraph tag. So here we have to identify the paragraph tag and insert our quote inside it. Okay, great. So how do we identify the paragraph tag? Well, we've done this in one of the previous lectures, but just to remind you, JavaScript has an inbuilt getElementsByTagName method, and that method can be accessed on the document object. So getElementsByTagName, we want to get the paragraph. And remember what I said before, this produces a node list. So we have to actually access the first item on this list. Then we want to change the inner HTML attribute of this paragraph. And we want that to be equal to what? That's right. We access our array of quotes and we pass in this rand variable. Whew, and this should be it. This should work. Let me just explain. Well, actually, firstly, let's see if it works, and then I'll explain how this whole math floor, math random thing works. So let's go to our index page. If we go back to our website and we click this, nothing's going to happen because we haven't drawn a link between clicking this button and executing that function, which is why we've got to go back to our index page. First thing we need to do is reference our script file, and that's in the public folder, and it's in a file called script.js. Now, all we have to do is we have to define when the function's called, and we're going to do that whenever the button's clicked. So we insert an on-click event on this button, and now we need to execute our function. What did we call our function? Let's have a look. We called our function showQuote. So we need to go back to our index file, and we need to execute showQuote whenever that button is clicked. Let's see if this works. Let's go to the website, refresh, let's click on show quote, and there you go. The paragraph gets the quote inserted into it. There's nothing permanent but change. And every time we click on this quote, it changes. How awesome is this? Do you understand how powerful functions are? We don't have to rewrite code every time we click a button. It's just executing that function again and again and again. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how does this math function work over here? Rand, math.floor, math.random. What is all this?